As a child, and in the world of literal thought that imbues childhood with some of its innocence, I never really knew what to make of the story that is at the center of our worship this morning. The idea of Jesus and 3 disciples making their way to the top of a mountain where Jesus was joined by Moses and Elijah, long dead even in Jesus' day, and Jesus' appearance being changed and his clothes becoming a dazzling white. Well, what's a kid to do with a story like that? It sounds a little strange, a little sci-fi, a little, well, frankly, weird. But of course it was presented as fact. The pictures on the flannel board made it so. There he was, Jesus, brilliantly white with sun rays surrounding him, and Moses and Elijah and the disciples, all 3 of them cowering on the ground with fear. If you could put it on a flannel board, it must be true. That, by the way, is how we got Facebook. It's nothing more than a postmodern flannel board. So is PowerPoint. And then came the crisis that is sure to come whenever literalism gives way to more complex thought. Around 12 or 13, my Sunday school classmates and I began having questions. Questions are the death of literalism. And when our teachers could not answer our questions in any way that seemed satisfactory to a 13-year-old mind, and then questioned our eternal salvation because we asked them, we were faced with a cruel decision. Either we could forget our questions and suppress any others that might arise, or we could just walk away from the faith that couldn't honestly answer a 13-year-old's questions. A lot of the class walked away. If not then over the ensuing years. A few of us stayed, though a good many of us continued to ask questions. So I'm not here this morning to tell you that the story of the Transfiguration happened literally and exactly, word for word, as it says in the pages of Scripture. I'm not here to tell you that it was a literal, historic act. There were 4 people who were on that mountaintop, and we're pretty sure that none of them could write. That means that before this story was ever written down, it was told. Sometimes when stories are told, they are told because of their meaning and not because of their actual historic happening. Stories are often metaphorical ways of addressing truth. And it just might be that this story is being told for that very reason, to share with us an essential truth. Now just consider it. It's not like we haven't heard this story before. Our first lesson from Exodus that Kate read for you tells a very similar story to that of the Transfiguration. Moses has gone to the heights of Mount Sinai to meet with God and to receive the covenant from God. And when Moses comes down from being in the presence of God, the skin on his face shines, so much so that the people of Israel are afraid to come near him. Imagine being scared of someone because of the color or the tone of their skin. But afraid they were, so they reached a compromise. Whenever Moses would stand before the people to speak to the people, he would wear a little veil to cover his face. But when Moses went in to stand in the presence of God, he would take off the veil. It's comical. Moses is putting on and taking off veils like he was Gypsy Rose Lee. Jesus' appearance is changed, And the disciples respond by suggesting that they build dwelling places on the mountaintop. Now, we usually think that they mean that they want to stay there in the glory and the wonder of it all. But what if the disciples thought that the people down below might just be too frightened to want to follow Jesus anymore, or even to consider following him at all? What if the disciples were thinking to themselves, this is all too weird, I guess we'll just have to stay here because no one is going to believe us or accept us? What if there is some of that going on in this story? But what if the stories, both Moses and Jesus' story, what if they are meant to remind us of something that is so easily forgotten? What if these stories are meant to remind us that you cannot encounter God and not be changed? What if part of the lesson is that, like Moses and Jesus, you cannot engage with God and stay exactly as you were before that encounter? Both Moses and Jesus had these extraordinary encounters with God and were profoundly changed by them in every way. Moses' time with God transformed, enlightened, and changed him in ways we may never fully know. But after this experience, Moses led the people with a newfound power and authority. We may never fully know what happened to Jesus on that mountaintop, but we know that when he came down from the mountain, he began to speak about going to Jerusalem, where his life would be placed in the hands of others. Jesus accepted what the future held because he chose to live in obedience to God. Jesus was transformed, enlightened, and changed. And this may be one of the principal lessons we are to glean from these two stories. You cannot have an encounter with God and not be changed. It is impossible to stay the person you were before such an encounter after having met God in a profound and overpowering way. Such encounters call forth new awareness, new attentiveness, new acceptance. Such encounters call forth new obedience, new service, new submission. Such encounters with God change the way we see ourselves, our purpose, and our world. Have an encounter with God, and nothing is ever the same. These moments of transfiguration remind us of who we are. Jesus' identity was confirmed when the voice from the cloud proclaimed, "This is my Son, my beloved, listen to him." In our moments of transfiguration, that same voice issues forth the same proclamation. "This is my child, my beloved, pay attention." The transfiguration of Jesus confirmed why he was here, his mission, his assignment. Jesus was here to reconcile the world to God and to one another. In our moments of transfiguration, as individuals and as a congregation, we are reminded that we are here as agents of reconciliation and reunion. These moments of transfiguration, whenever and wherever they come, draw us closer to God and God's will for our lives, and we are transformed, enlightened, and changed. And when we are transformed, enlightened, and changed, can the world be too far behind? We may not be called to a mountaintop. Our appearance may not change. We may not shine like the sun. But these moments of transfiguration, transformation, and enlightenment might just enable us to share a little of God's pure light into the dim and dingy corners of our world. Our encounters with God may be just enough to push us toward opening our hearts and our hands to the poor, the downtrodden, the dispossessed. Even as we find ourselves changed, we may begin to see ways that we can change the world around us, making it more of what God intended it to be. And if we can be changed, the world can be changed. For now and evermore. Amen.